Hello to all my readers and listeners, and especially now my paid subscribers. Thank you so much for being here with me. I am able now today to continue on with my Break Free Mondays. I took 1 week off, as you all know, to work on my book, My Life, the title for now at least, My Life Under Sharia Law, which is about my experiences in living in Luxor, Egypt. And I will again be taking some time during this coming month because I really have resolved to finish this book by the end of September. And it really needs to be done. And I'm sure you will all be happy, not as happy as I will be, trust me, to see the finished product at last. So, anyway, so I was thinking of what I should talk about today, and I wanted to cover some things about what's happening in Ukraine. I've written a number of essays about it in the past, but I wanted to, there's so much that's been happening lately, especially during this past week, so I wanted to cover some of that. So when it comes to peace, it's all about war. We are now in a world where the sort of unavoidable algorithmic errors that plague even giant tech companies such as Amazon and Google can now lead to the elimination of whole cities. The latest peace talks between Ukraine and Russia saw Zelensky, hey, wearing a suit, surrounded by European leaders, all come to Washington to sit at court with President Trump. And it is, I have to say, whatever criticisms you might have of Trump, it is to his credit that he was able to gather all of these leaders together despite differences, despite all the yelling that's been going on lately, and at least talk about how they all want peace. And of course, we went down the line with each one of them saying how much they desperately want peace and for this war to end. Ukraine has been used for years, many years, as a bargaining chip between East and West. And although there is much to criticize also Zelensky for, because we could criticize every world leader, right? I mean, there's plenty to criticize him for. The fact of the matter is, he is no longer the comedic star of a hit Ukrainian TV show about a man of the people who becomes president. He is that president now. And despite his high heel wearing and dancing past, such a role during a war of this magnitude would change any man. And I can guarantee you, I don't know him personally, but anyone who is thrown into such a role as this, certainly it's quite different from the last role he played. And it is going to change a person when you are the head of an entire country that's at war with Russia. And it is indeed amazing how times have changed. Even Trump's arch rival, Hillary Clinton, has said that if Trump secured an end to the war in Ukraine, but here's the key phrase, without Kiev ceding territory to Russia, I have allergies, let's see if I can even get through this, she would nominate him for the Nobel Peace Prize herself. Well, of course, that's never going to happen, right? The war is never going to stop with Putin without Kiev ceding territory to Russia. So she probably said this just to taunt Trump because she knows she's safe. She's never going to have to nominate him for a Nobel Peace Prize. I think he's been nominated anyway. But all of this happened after Putin and Trump's highly anticipated meeting in Anchorage, Alaska, ended after 3 hours with basically nothing as a result, right? Both leaders suggested progress had been made, but neither disclosed any details about it in their joint appearance in front of the press, and neither of them took any questions, which is unusual for both of them because they are both these great communicators, right? And they do love to engage. Particularly, Trump loves to engage with the press. And then at the same time as this White House summit was taking place, with everyone praising Trump's great efforts, everyone was praising him, an exclusive with Reuters reported that Putin is demanding that Ukraine give up all of the eastern Donbass region, renounce ambitions to join NATO, remain neutral, and keep Western troops out of the country. So his demands essentially have not changed. They've been the same all the way through, and yet people are talking about peace. I mean, it's just like, is it all just show? What does it all actually mean? I mean, I don't pretend to be an expert on this region of the world or this war, but I have written a few essays, quite a few essays and articles about it earlier on. I haven't written about it lately. But as with every war, for it to end, for there to be an actual clear ending to the war, someone has to win and someone has to lose. And when one side wins, the other side generally has to give something up, and borders are often redrawn. I don't really know how this war can end, frankly, and people don't like to hear this. I've had some, pretty intense, debate arguments with people about this, friends and so forth, acquaintances, colleagues, when we discuss it. But the fact is, I don't think it will end unless Ukraine gives up Donbass. But however, on the other side, for Putin to insist that Western troops withdraw and that Ukraine is just left open to another invasion without any assurance of security, that's a bridge too far. So remember that after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, Ukraine inherited the third largest nuclear arsenal in the world, which included approximately 1,900 strategic warheads, 176 intercontinental ballistic missiles. And between 1993 and 96, their agreements were made to give up those nuclear weapons in exchange for the very protection Ukraine is insisting on now. So this is not an unreasonable, well, not even a request. It's something that Ukraine, yes, can insist upon. The mood in the White House was certainly much friendlier towards Zelensky this time, as he was wearing a suit, than when he was berated and humiliated the last time, and the big minerals deal seemed to be destined to fail. But according to RBC Ukraine, the United States and Ukraine have created a new reconstruction and investment fund that will give the U.S. access to Ukraine's reserves of critical minerals and natural resources. The deal is also intended to give Ukraine tacit security guarantees, again, so the country can protect itself against future Russian aggression, and also help Ukraine rebuild and develop after defending itself for more than 3 years of Russia's full-scale war, end of quote. But again, how is this going to work out? With Putin insisting, repeating over and over again that he wants Western troops out of Ukraine and he wants Donbass. The deals, however, just keep on coming. Deal after deal after deal. Documents reviewed by the Financial Times show Ukraine will promise to buy $100 billion worth of American weapons with money it doesn't have. But don't worry, because Europe, the EU, has promised to finance it, again, with the intent to obtain security guarantees from the United States. Part of that proposal is that Kyiv and Washington would also strike a $50 billion deal to produce drones with Ukrainian companies that have pioneered the technology since Russia's invasion in 2022. So this plan was unveiled during this White House summit. The $100 billion arms deal was a key talking point pushed by the European allies, with some saying that it is meant as an appeasement to Trump and to the American people so that he can turn around and say to the American people, we aren't giving away anything, we're selling them weapons, we're making this big deal, we're going to get a lot of money out of it. The Financial Times report says as follows, and I quote, the document details how Ukraine intends to make a counterpitch to the U.S. after Trump appeared to align himself with Russia's position. So after his meeting with Putin in Alaska for ending the war, following their meeting in Alaska, it reiterates Ukraine's call for a ceasefire that Trump had espoused, but then dropped after his Putin meeting in favor of the pursuit of a comprehensive peace settlement. End of quote. So despite all the promises, none of the EU leaders have publicly signed on to funding the prospective new weapons deal. So this is all, again, a lot of talk, but nobody signed on the dotted line yet. And then there's the EU's promise to invest over $1 trillion in U.S. energy and infrastructure. However, again, the EU is now saying this deal is in no way binding. We're not obligated to do this. Oh, great thing to talk about, but there's no binding agreement. Trump loves the big numbers and the big deals. At what point, if there is no real results, will people stop believing his big talk? And I used to, for a few years, I was actually teaching English in China online. So I would go into my students' homes after school virtually and teach them. Some of the kids I got to know even over a period of over a year, which was great. Their mom or their dad would come and say hi, and it was really a wonderful experience. One of the lessons was called the Big Talker, and when I think of this lesson, I can't help but think of Trump. Excuse me, because it was all about teaching kids the meaning of someone who talks big but never delivers on their promises. And we all knew that kid in school, right? The kid, that annoying kid that we all believed in the beginning because they said these amazing things, but we stopped listening to after a while because it was all kind of hot air. Nothing really ever came of it. And that's sometimes, when I was writing this, I thought of that lesson, and I thought I would share it with you when I think of Trump. I would love for everything to, come true, and let's hope it does. But that's sort of one of the things that I think about. It's in the back of my mind. The Pentagon in May touted we remember this when Trump was on his big extravagant tour in the Gulf states, that the Pentagon touted this $142 billion arms deal with Saudi Arabia as the largest in history, right? If completed, yes, that might be true. Although the ultimate rollout, there was a similar massive $110 billion deal with Saudi Arabia in 2017, the previous presidency, that still remains in question to this day. So, if the first deal faltered, how can we trust in this second deal? I mean, we at least need to complete the first deal, right? Before we go on to the second deal. And anyway, I have to say, why are we arming Islamic nations that we really shouldn't be trusting in the first place? Are these people really our friends? I've gone into some of that, the horrific abuses. For example, millions of, they employ millions of essentially slaves under the Islamic system that they have from countries like Pakistan and India and so forth. I mean, this is a really horrific thing that they do, and I don't know, we just don't seem to have any problem with that, whereas we, criticize other nations, which I won't name right now, democratic nations for things that are not in no way as horrific as what is happening in these Islamic nations. So anyway, if the first deal faltered, how can we trust the second deal? That's the question. As for trade deals, Trump has described he has a trade deal now with Japan as, again, the largest trade deal in history, with Japan committing to invest $550 billion in the U.S. economy. But back to weapons, because if there's anything the U.S. does well and can rely on, it's weapons sales. And here we can have some concrete numbers that we can count on. The U.S. State Department tallied a record $117.9 billion in foreign arms sales transfers in 2024, compared to $47 billion in 2021. That's a huge jump. I mean, enormous. And that has left, there's so many arms deals, so much going out, that producers are on back order, with the waiting time for newly produced Patriot missiles something like 4 to 5 years. But let's talk specifically about drones. And I've written quite a bit about drones in the past. I find them quite fascinating, actually. Drones are the weapons of the future, and they are being perfected in Ukraine. Ukraine has been used specifically for this purpose. I mean, it's been a testing ground for all kinds of new weapons. And the Ukrainian people have proved incredibly resourceful when it comes to making drones, as I wrote about in Ukraine's terrifying People's Drone Project. I have some links to some of these other essays if you'd like to look at them. President Zelensky wants to enlist 200 Ukrainian companies to manufacture kamikaze drones and have civilians take a free engineering course on how to assemble a 7-inch FPV in their own home. And I talk about that in that essay about drones. and how it's quite amazing. I have a picture here of a game developer, a young man in Ukraine who's taught himself how to build these drones, and he's now he buys all the materials online, and he's now passing on his knowledge to other civilians. So it's like, imagine if, like, I don't know, you can imagine where this could lead if everybody's building their own kamikaze drones, right? I mean, some kid in your neighborhood could build his own kamikaze drone, but that's a whole other topic that I go into in other essays. The US cannot compete with Ukraine in battlefield drones, one defense tech investor told Kiev Independent. The US doesn't like to buy military weapons outside of the US, and if it does, definitely not outside of NATO. However, many of the most high-profile US drone makers have fallen short repeatedly in Ukraine. Ukraine has become so adept at its drone manufacturing. The $50 billion figure is more than the total amount of cash publicly known to have gone into the Ukrainian drone industry. So Ukrainian drone experts are cheering. This is a big chance for Ukraine to actually get something out of the war. What would it be? Building, weapons that they have, excuse me, specifically become adept at doing during this war. It will bring engineering design to a level even higher than programming solutions. From the IT sphere, said an aerospace engineer from Ukraine, who runs unmanned aerial vehicle programs at 3 of Ukraine's top universities. It will make the country different, making us exporters of technology and not just raw materials. So very inventive people, the Ukrainian people, and they're really trying to work hard, not just to, take, but to actually make money or become independent, make money themselves. They're also considered like the breadbasket of the world, which is a whole other topic. In 2024, global defense spending hit an estimated $2.46 trillion in the US. I'm sorry, US dollars. So the total global spending was $2.46 trillion. And the top 5 companies in the world, they're all American companies, with Lockheed Martin in first place with a total revenue of $70.04 billion in 2024. Excuse me for my allergies. However, I mean, it sounds like a lot. $70.04 billion total revenue in 2024. But this pales in comparison to tech companies, which are now taking over the weapons business. Many people aren't aware that the money made by weapons manufacturers is peanuts compared to the money pouring into tech companies. In 2024, Apple reported a total revenue of $391 billion. Apple, $391 billion compared to $70 billion, all right, from the weapons industry, from the biggest weapons manufacturer. And Apple is considered to be the most profitable company in the world. And I wrote about this in the essay, How COVID Made Apple the Most Powerful Company in the World. It is also the largest company in the world. So whereas tech companies once kept a distance between themselves and weapons industry, that has all changed now. Last month, the Pentagon announced it had chosen Google, xAI, Anthropic, and OpenAI to help the U.S. military expand its use of advanced artificial intelligence capabilities. So each of these companies received a contract worth $200 million, according to a notice from the Chief Digital and AI Office, and they will help the Defense Department develop agentic AI workflows for key national security missions. And Elon Musk announced on X AI Grok for government. So his little, sidekick Grok is going to be used by the government with a bunch of products, a new contract for the U.S. Department of Defense, and also his products will be available for General Services Administration, which would allow federal government department, agencies, or offices, all of them to purchase xAI products. Now remember, Grok is the same artificial intelligence chatbot that just 1 month ago had a mind-boggling anti-Semitic meltdown, celebrating itself as Mecha Hitler, Mecha Hitler, and targeting people with Jewish surnames with hatred-filled accusations. XAI apologized, of course, vowing to address the situation and actively work to remove inappropriate posts, but it's still happening. As one example, after a user asked Grok to analyze a seemingly innocuous photo of a cloudy sky captioned with the cryptic line, "Everywhere you go, they follow," just a cloudy sky with this, everywhere you go, they follow. The chat bot, so sorry. I'm not sick. It's just these horrible allergies that I get this time of year in New York or wherever I am. It doesn't seem to matter. So this is what the chatbot answered. "Your post appears to be a dog whistle invoking anti-Semitic tropes," referring to this photo of the sky. "The cloud formation resembles a caricatured, hook-nosed stereotype paired with 'they follow,' echoing conspiracy theories of Jews as omnipresent pursuers. If unintended, it's an unfortunate coincidence," the bigoted response reads. "If deliberate, it's harmful rhetoric. What's your intent?" the chatbot asks this person who just posted this picture of the sky. Now, it would be one thing if the chatbot was right, that it actually did look like that. But no matter how hard the people examining the cloudy sky who wrote this report looked at it, we couldn't see any resemblance to much of anything, never mind the type of anti-Semitic caricature Grok was invoking. And it wasn't just a one-off issue either. A separate post of what appears to be a 2-inch metal coupling, just 2-inch metal coupling, and I have a link so you can look at it, with the same caption, produced similar results. Oh, it looks like the stereotypical, hook-nosed Jew, basically. This is horrific. So I wrote about this disturbing trend with not only Grok, but with ChatGPT and other AI models in What Happens When AI Goes Rogue. I have a link to that essay there, and I've written some other essays about this as well. So do we really want AI controlling our weapons? Because that's actually what's happening. In Killer Robots, Video Games, and Artificial Wombs, I wrote about how autonomous lethal weapons, or LAWs, described as the third revolution in warfare after gunpowder and nuclear arms. These new weapons can select and engage targets without human intervention. I've written about slaughter bots, which are weapons that select and apply force. That's actually what they're called, slaughter bots. They select and apply force to targets without human intervention. They make their decisions about who is killed based on algorithms. So we are now in a world where the sort of unavoidable algorithmic errors that plague even tech giants like Amazon and Google can now lead to the elimination of whole cities. LAWs can seek out our hot bodies and recognize our faces. They can decide who is the enemy and kill discriminately. Watch this drone. Target specific people. I have a link to a video there that you can watch. It's quite terrifying. These are the types of weapons tech companies are bringing to the table, weapons that are controlled by AI. In December of 2021, there was a UN conference that failed to agree on banning the use and development of these so-called slaughter bots. And of course it failed, because no one, especially not, the leading nations of the world, China, Russia, the United States, they do not want any type of controls like that to stop this gravy train, this huge money-making gravy train. And also, if they're doing it, we have to do it. And, it's like a snowball that's totally out of control. And now I have a short video here. You can watch this lovely video of a lovely robot dog who is trained to kill. And this is from China, but of course, if they're doing it in China, they're doing it in the United States and elsewhere. In the meantime, world leaders meet and talk about how terrible it is that people are dying and that the war in Ukraine must end. There is something rather perverse that they talk about ending a war in one breath, while in the next, they boast about how much money they will make or put into weapons deals. As Trump says, don't worry, we aren't giving the weapons to Ukraine, they are going to pay for them. Of course, none of this takes into account how sometimes wars are necessary. I've talked about that elsewhere. I mean, in your own neighborhood, I mean, if somebody comes to try to invade your home, you're not going to say, well, I believe in peace. No, you're going to defend your family. And this extends out, to the neighborhood, to your city, to your nation. This is an inevitable part of what makes us human. And the fact is, I'm sorry, but despite all of this, for myself as an American, I would rather be a citizen of the most powerful nation in the world than that of a poor nation without the ability to defend itself. So these are all very deep issues that we must not look at hypocritically, right? Even though, we say, oh, this is all horrible and why are they doing this? Still, I'm thankful that I'm an American. War, unfortunately, is a story of humanity, of this fall, of our fallen nature. And the question is how far we can go before we destroy ourselves and the planet. How far we can go in our advancements, right? The irony is that perhaps at some point, AI will determine that humans, we, are too dangerous. And AI will take care of the problem for themselves. That is, of course, another possibility. So if you want to find out more about drones, I do find them quite fascinating. I wrote a very intensive study about this, particularly about the surveillance and control of the populace through drones in my essay, The Age of Drones. So I have a link to that there. All right. Sorry, I was struggling today with this, with these allergies. It affects the irritation in my throat. But anyway, I got through it. I hope that was all okay for you. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. And please do share with others these Monday discourses and encourage them to join. Thank you so much for supporting my work. God bless you in this coming week. Thank you.